All right, I think we're on chapter 19, verse 22. And Kimmy is not here to read, so I will read. Gibeah's crime. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. This kind of sounds like a lot. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him. Verse 23. And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not do this vile thing. 24. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now, violate them, and do with them what seems good to you. But against this man, do not do this outrageous thing. 25. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and made her go out with them. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. I'm surprised she survived. Verse 26. As the morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. 27. And her master rose up in the morning, and when he opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, get up, let us be going. But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man rose and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her, limb by limb, into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, such a thing has never happened or has been seen from the day that the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. I thought that when it says he rose in the morning, he opened the doors of the house. Oh,
And
it was
she
the
was
man
dead.
visiting. It was the man visiting's concubine.
Yeah, she was dead.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was dead.
I was thinking it was the man that owned the house, his daughter, and the man's concubine was what he meant. But then they just
He,
sent the concubine and not the daughter.
he probably came out the door and kicked her and said, get up, let's go.
Exactly.
That's what I was feeling like as I was reading it.
Oh, that's what I saw in my mind.
Like, hey, yeah, let's go now. You, who cares that you
So
were
she,
raped all night
so
long?
she didn't get up, so he just cut her up.
Well, my Bible
Yeah.
notes below that the Greek version said she was dead.
And mine reads, he put the body on the donkey. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home, and that's when he cut her up.
Maybe he was so like I bet he was so angry that he wanted to. I bet the story is that he's wanting all of Israel to go to war.
He should be happy it wasn't him that was out there
Well,
because
I
they
guarantee
wanted him.
if they were gonna sodomize him, they sodomized her.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I
Yeah.
mean. They wanted him, but they got her instead.
Can you imagine being so out of control of yourself that you have to rape somebody? Like,
And remember, the Levite was a priest of God that
And he
allowed
shoved her out the door.
exactly.
But
well,
it does sound like a lot
it did
what
sound like sort of
happened
a lot.
in Sodom. Because they did the same thing. They beat on the door and said, send him out. We want to have sex with him. And he sent his daughters out.
Okay, so that's why they wanted the man because he was the priest.
They just
No,
want
they
the
were
man
they,
because they were that depraved.
they were depraved, yes.
Okay.
But you know,
Mm.
homosexuality today is fine. Here
Mhm.
it wasn't. God must have
Yeah.
changed somewhere along the line. I
Well,
say
this is
that with tongue in
this is what before we get into John and all that. My concordance, Cindy, and Kathy, yours might be the same. Nowhere is the unwritten law of hospitality stronger than in the Middle East. Protecting a guest at any cost ranked at the top of a man's code of honor. But here, the
That makes
hospitality code turned to the rape and abuse of a daughter and companion were preferable to the possibility of a conflict between a guest and a neighbor. The two men were selfish. They didn't want to get hurt themselves. They lacked courage. They didn't want to face a conflict even when lives were at stake, and they disobeyed God's law. They allowed deliberate abuse and murder. What drastic consequences can result when social protocol carries more authority than moral convictions? Isn't that what they were doing in India to those women?
Yeah.
Wasn't that India?
Yeah.
They would, in some countries, they literally sew a woman up so that her wedding night, she has to be broke open.
Mm.
What did you say? Protecting a guest at any cost was a code of honor?
Yes. Protecting a guest at any cost ranked top at the man's code of honor.
And then you said something like about the human there at the end, like being more important.
Oh, what drastic consequences can result when social protocol carries more authority than moral convictions?
Social protocol
carries
more
authority
than
moral convictions.
And
I think that word was fanatic. I can't say it, but being a fanatic, like
fanaticism.
Yeah.
Fanaticism.
I'm not reading it, so it came easily.
Yeah.
So protecting a guest at any cost was a code of a man's honor. Social protocol carries more authority than moral convictions equals tragedy. All right,
and they were selfish. They didn't want to get hurt. It didn't matter that they sent a woman out there to get hurt. They didn't want to get hurt. And they didn't have any courage. They were spineless.
How could you even go to sleep
knowing that was going on?
Knowing that was happening to your wife that you begged to come home with you after 4 months of her already being angry. Whenever you're ready, Cindy.
Okay, 1922, perverted men. Literally, sons of Belial.
How do you spell that?
Belial.
Belial, sons.
That is, worthless men who desired to commit sodomy against the Levite. The phrase elsewhere is used for idolaters in Deuteronomy, neglectors of the poor in Deuteronomy, drunks in 1 Samuel, immoral people in 1 Samuel, and rebels against the civil authority, 2 Samuel and Proverbs. Belial can be traced to the false god Baal and is also a term for yoke, parentheses, they cast off the yoke of decency, and a term for entangling or injuring. It is used in the New Testament of Satan in 2 Corinthians.
Hmm.
1924. Let me bring them out. The host showed a disgraceful compromise in his exaggerated desire to extend hospitality to his male guest. He should have protected all in his house, and so should have the Levite, even at the risk of their own lives in guarding the women. His sad view of women was demonstrated by his willingness to hand his daughter or the guest concubine over to indecent men. Lot's plunge from decency was similar in Genesis. Here, repeated rape and finally murder were the pitiful sequel. 1925. The man took his concubine. This is unthinkable weakness and cowardice for any man, especially a priest of God. Apparently, he even slept through the night or stayed in bed out of fear, since he didn't see her again until he awakened and prepared to leave. 1929, divided her into 12 pieces. The Levite's bizarre butchery to divide the woman's body into 12 parts was his shocking summons for aroused Israelite redress. No doubt a message went with each part, and the fact that he, quote, sent assumes messengers. As he calculated, many Israelites were incensed and desired to avenge the atrocity. Nothing could have aroused universal indignation and horror more than this radical summons from the Levite. I wonder how he told his side of the story. So he's sending this out and everybody should be outraged. But did
he left it happen.
Exactly. Did he give that part of the story? I bet he didn't. That's it.
Oh, Kathy?
Okay.
I think that was interesting that word beguiled comes from Baal.
Yeah.
That we've studied a lot of, and I think it was First or Second Kings. We talked about Baal a lot. How they had sex under every tree and every green.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sexual sin is definitely definitely a perversion of Satan worship.
Okay. Iniquity in Gibeah, verses 22 to 28. Gibeah had become like Sodom, a city so wicked that God wiped it off the face of the earth. The men of the city were indulging in immoral practices that were contrary to nature and the laws of God. The word "no" in Judges 19:22 means to have sexual experience with. These sinners were excited because a new man was in town and they wanted to enjoy him. The host courageously and correctly described their desires as wickedness and folly in verse 23 and a vile thing in verse 24. And he tried to prevent them from raping his guest. Like Lot in Sodom, the host offered them his daughter, which shows the low estimate some men in that day had of women and of sexual purity. How a father could offer his own daughter as a sacrifice to the lust of a mob is difficult to understand. Yet many parents today allow their sons and daughters' minds and hearts to be violated by what they see and hear in movies, on television, and at rock concerts. Chastity of mind and heart is essential for chastity of the body. Since the Levite was afraid the mob would kill him, he pacified them by giving them his concubine. And she had to endure gang rape the whole night, verse 25. Our hearts revolt at the thought of a man so insensitive to the feelings of a human being made in the image of God, so indifferent to the sanctity of sex and the responsibility of marriage, and so unconcerned about the laws of God that he would sacrifice his wife to save his own skin. Was he punishing her for being unfaithful to him? If so, the punishment was far greater than the sin. But it gets worse. Not only did the Levite surrender his wife to the perverted appetites of an ungodly mob, but also he was able to lie down and go to sleep while they were abusing her in the street. How callous can a man become? And how naive was he to expect that she would be alive the next morning? Finding her dead on the doorstep, but not feeling guilty about it, he put her corpse on one of the donkeys and made his way home. Then he did a despicable thing. He desecrated and mutilated her corpse by cutting it into 12 parts and sending one part to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Of course, he wanted to mobilize the support of the tribes and punish the men of Gibeah who had killed his wife. But in fact, he was the one who had let them kill her. Surely there were other ways to call attention to Gibeah's crime. I got a note here. Hold on.
I think it's interesting that I guess I didn't think about the fact that he probably was close to where this was happening, even. For her to have been raped all night long and made it back to his threshold, they didn't return her. And then she died there. So that means she would have been very, very weak. They had to be close enough that he probably could have heard what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
What a
It
disgusting.
could have been in front of the house.
Yeah, what a disgusting human.
This note says King Saul used a similar approach to arouse the people to fight the Ammonites, but he cut up a yoke of oxen in 1 Samuel 11. The sin of Gibeah was so terrible that the prophet Hosea referred to it centuries later as an example of great sin in Hosea 9:9 and 10:9.
Hosea 9:9 and 10:9.
Yeah, and 10:9. Had the Levite
Example of
gone to
what?
Shiloh, what's that?
Great example. Hosea uses a great example of what?
Find it.
Sorry.
The sin of Gibeah was so terrible that the prophet Hosea referred to it centuries later as an example of great sin.
Thank you.
Had the Levite gone to Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood, and had he consulted with the high priest, he could have dealt with the matter according to the law of God and avoided causing a great deal of trouble. Once tempers were heated in Israel, however, it was difficult to stop the fire from spreading. That's it.
Wow. Worsby was short today.
So he was trying to incite war.
Yeah. Get back at them for what he allowed to happen.
Yeah. A for the man.
What part were you reading? Was it page 471?
Yeah, 471 into 472.
Okay, Tony Evans, verse 22. They were having dinner. As they were having dinner, wicked men of the city surrounded the house and beat on the door. They demanded that the man hand over the Levite. Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. Careful Bible readers will notice that this story sounds familiar. In Genesis 19, Abraham's nephew Lot lived in the city of Sodom and welcomed into his home 2 angels. But the wicked men of the city demanded, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out to us so we can have sex with them." The author of Judges wants us to see a sad reality. God's people, who were called to be holy, had become just like the Canaanites whom they had driven out. That's a good point, too. These are Israelites. These are not the Canaanites, the Moabites, the whatever, Achanomites. 23 and 24. The old man, this is controversial, but I think we see it today. You have your good Jews, your bad Jews, your good Christians, your bad Christians. It's like you need to know God's word and be discerning. 23 and 24. The old man defended his guest, but then he said the unthinkable. "Here, let me bring out my virgin daughter and the man's concubine now. Abuse them and do whatever you want to them, but don't commit this outrageous thing against this man." This is horrific. Though he wanted to protect the Levite, he was willing to do so by handing over 2 defenseless women to a group of rapists. This is a twisted and depraved form of manhood. Even he, apparently among the city's finest, given his hospitality. Well, that's true. He was the one person that saw them and was like, it's dangerous, come to my house. Given his hospitality, was completely without conscience with regard to how women should be treated. 25 through 30, the Levite grew so concerned for his own safety that he cruelly delivered his concubine over to be raped by these men all night. He slept while she was abused. He points out verse 25. Does this say he slept in verse 25? Mine doesn't say he slept, but he must. I would agree he probably did. The Levite grew concerned. He delivered his concubine. He slept while she was abused. In the morning, she collapsed at the doorway where her master was. Yet he still showed no remorse. Ready to continue his journey, he said to her callously, "Get up, let's go." And when she didn't respond, he put her on a donkey and carried his dead concubine to his house, where he butchered her. This story is enough to make you ill. He cut her into 12 pieces and then sent her throughout the territory of Israel. Those who saw the grim delivery said nothing like this has ever happened since the day the Israelites came out of the land of Egypt. This was serious cultural decadence and decline. There was homosexuality, rape, cultural chaos, and mutilation among God's people in the promised land because there was no divine standard operating. When people within a nation move away from honoring God, debauchery, decline, and chaos do inevitably set in. It doesn't matter who is in power. Until the spiritual aspect gets rectified and the idols are dismissed, specifically among God's people, there will be no God, no king, no divine standard operating within that country that can fix the downhill race into tragedy. That's a good point. It's about the heart of the people and the church needs to do its job.
My concordance is going to say more about that when you're done with Tony.
I am done.
Okay, whenever we get away from God and his word, all sorts of evil can follow. Our drifting away from God may be slow and almost imperceptible. Is that a word, Cindy?
Yeah.
What's it mean?
We
We don't.
notice it.
You don't see it. You don't notice it.
Okay. With the ultimate results affecting a future generation, we must continually call our nation back to God and work toward the establishment of God's moral and spiritual reign in the heart of every person. That's what we were talking about before we started our.
Well, and my thought is too, this like they drove out the Canaanites. These are the Israelites. They drove out the Canaanites because of this behavior was so disgusting and abominable to the Lord. And yet somehow this has infiltrated and I think it's like our culture today. It happens 1 inch at a time. Like the more we allow, the more that happens and becomes normal. I was just listening to a thing this morning where they were talking about like all Satan has to do is influence that first generation. And if you convince that first generation that all is well and this is okay, they're the ones that are going to educate the next generation and the next generation and the next. We literally do his work for him. Because once we're convinced that something's okay, it becomes the culture.
I think TV has desensitized us a lot. Because back in the day, you were not allowed to say a curse word on television. You weren't allowed to show any naked bodies. And now the commercials practically do it.
It's like pornography, some of the shows.
It's pretty drastic from the way we were brought up.
Yeah, look
Just
at Lucy
wasn't
and Lucy and Ricky and Dick Van Dyke and Laura, or whatever, Rob and Laura. I don't think they slept in the same bed even.
It didn't.
It didn't.
And now the soap operas, there ain't hardly one. I bet I don't watch them that doesn't have a gay couple. And even some of the Hallmark movies, I have to turn them off.
Right.
Well, and it's worse with social media. It's everywhere.
When I think when you read, just like reading this passage, and it's so disgusting how the men treated the women, it would be no wonder that there are women who want nothing to do with a man.
Exactly. That's what I've been trying to say for a long time.
Not saying all men are like that, but
No,
you
I mean,
know,
we have a few good men, but who wants to be subservient to this kind of a mentality? You know, if you have a man who's truly godly, it's easy to submit because it's a mutual relationship, mutual respect, you know what I mean? Like mutual care and concern um but if you have a man who treats his wife like she's a sex slave and that she's subservient to him and he's God in the home, basically, who wants to live that life? And I think that's a very controversial subject because I think people are like, well, they go to church, so he's a Christian, and you're a Christian, so this is what you need to do as a wife. Well, if he's truly a Christian, then that behavior is not acceptable. If he's a Christian, then he has if he's saying that he's a Christian and he's doing that, he is theologically using God's word to manipulate and abuse. And I think the church has a hard time separating that.
and I don't even think, in my opinion, I don't even think that saying a man is a Christian makes him a better man than one that's not, because there are a lot of men who don't attend church, who are probably would tell you they're not a Christian, but they're very good men, you know, in caring for their family, their wife, whatever. So here again, you can't just say the title Christian and think everything's great.
Well,
Right.
and I think this goes back to the Ten Commandments where God says, do not defame my name. Everyone wants to say it's about cussing. It's not. It's about don't you dare go out there and say you belong to me and you're representing me and then act like a freaking heathen. Because
Right.
you're hurting the testimony and you're hurting the gospel and what Jesus came and died for. Like you're using that and misrepresenting him.
And then people don't want to become Christians because they see how you are.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. Which
It
makes
took
me
a
really
long
sad.
time. It took a long time for my dad to become a Christian because of other people. Thank God he did, but it took a long time.
Well, and if you look at body of believers all over the world, is morality really being addressed?
No.
Is justice, God's justice, really being addressed?
Mm-mm.
I don't think it is.
Hmm.
I think it's, we just, yes, we're to love. And I'm not going back on what Stan had to say, but when do you ever hear about morally what we need to be doing?
Mhm. Well, and I think that's where we go back to this thing, like as individuals, if we're in the love letter, and if we know right from wrong, and if we know God's character, and if we care, and um, then you're going to share the truth with the people around you. And as individuals, we have the responsibility to, I mean, just this weekend, a young lady was asking me a lot of hard questions that required hard answers. But I had a responsibility to tell her the truth. If no one's going to speak the truth, or we're too cowardly to speak the truth, then how's it change? Because it all comes back to the heart issue. And I think what culture has done and Satan has done very well is say, oh, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, which I do think you need to be gentle and loving and kind and all that. But you like we tell our children the truth. We discipline them to help them not have to have heartache later. Like I feel like Christianity is kind of the same thing. Like you have to be honest and loving in truth because you're trying to save them from the fire. Like you're helping them escape the fire. And I think there's a lot of good men, but I think a lot of men have been told, oh, well, boys will be boys and it's okay because that's just what men do. And, your wife has to put up with this because she's a Christian and you don't have to get better. You don't have to, because I do think like, we all come into marriage or in relationships with our own luggage and our own brokenness. But I think when you can see that a person is trying, that they really do love the Lord, they really are trying, our job is to help each other be better. And I think when you see that, then there's the grace for, the mistakes. But when you have someone that's like, well, I don't have to change because she has to put up with it. I mean, how bad was this woman's home that she left as a concubine and went back to her dad's house, which would have been totally against the norm back then. She was a concubine. She wasn't even truly a wife. She was basically his sex slave, child producer for workers.
And she wanted out.
He would have had more workers. So what was he doing in that relationship to begin with? Yeah, that she felt the need to escape.
Imagine how that father felt hearing all this.
He would have blamed her.
I think so
guarantee
too.
you. I guarantee he would have blamed her for not being a good enough wife or not.
Even if she, screamed and all of that during all that thing, they could have heard that.
Yeah, I don't understand how anybody could sleep during that. With a conscience, I don't understand.
Did they have a conscience then? I mean, he was a priest. He was a man of God.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, wouldn't you sacrifice your life for someone else?
And I'm confused. Did he sacrifice his daughter? Was that his daughter?
I don't think the daughter ever went out. I think it was the concubine. He offered his daughter. The man of this house from this town, who was an Israelite, offered his daughter and the guest's concubine.
Verse 24, here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I
But
will bring them
didn't take
out
the
to you.
daughter. They didn't take the daughter. It doesn't talk about the daughter.
No, the concubine's the only one that he offered the daughter, but the concubine, I think, is the only one the story reflects was raped and killed.
Which is sad. What kind of father could offer the daughter?
One like Lot.
Okay.
Who then went on to have
Makes sense, I
children with his
suppose.
daughters, by the way. Who then went on to have children with his daughters.
That's yeah,
Ammonites and the Moabites.
I forgot. Yeah, all right.
Now,
Well,
as the story goes, in his defense, he was drunk and he didn't know that he was having sex with his daughters. But
Please.
I don't know how that all works, when you don't know and you're having sex. But
well, it's just as bad today with all the sex trafficking and, P. Diddy. I mean, it's just as bad today.
there's so much
Yeah.
evil. We don't even know a tenth, probably, of the evil.
I don't know if I want to know, but I can pray for it.
Exactly. That's good wisdom there, Mom.
My sister was telling me something with like, I'm so bad with all these names, but like Gaza Strip and how they're just doing horrible, horrible things. And she goes, I can send you the pictures. I'm like, please don't, because I'll never get that out of my brain.
Fantastic opportunity for trafficking. Any war is. The same thing the Babylonians and the Assyrians did when they would take the families as prisoners of war and then they would separate them. I think we're a little late to It's like 10:20. I think we're a little late to start chapter 20. I guess we could start reading if you guys wanted to. We could get read through it and then tomorrow do the commentaries. You want to do that?
Let's read through it tomorrow.
You think read through it tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't have any breaks.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
either,
don't
and
either.
it's long.
Well, that's why I was saying if we have 10 minutes, we could probably get read through and then read the commentaries tomorrow. You want to just do it all in one day? It'll probably end up split into 2 days.
How much are we going to remember from tonight?
True. So we're going to be
With
too busy
my
mulling
memory, yeah.
over what we read today.
My thoughts.
Yeah, really.
Fashion men.
Picked
All
a
right,
great day to
ladies.
join.
Yeah.
This concludes the reading of God's word for today. Then we'll pick up tomorrow on Judges chapter 20.